The dining room glowed with the soft light of a chandelier, but the air was sharp with tension. At the head of the long mahogany table, Vincent Morrison's booming voice shattered what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner. "You're worthless trash, and my son deserves better than you," he declared, his words echoing off the walls like a hammer strike. Every fork froze mid-air. 23 relatives turned their heads in unison, their stunned silence pressing down heavier than the chandelier's glow. Across the table, the young woman he had insulted sat frozen, her fork hovering near her mouth. Her name was Ruth Peterson, and though her chest burned with humiliation, her voice stayed steady when she finally answered. "You're absolutely right, sir." Her tone was calm, deliberate, as she set her fork down and folded her napkin with precision. Gasps fluttered across the table. Vincent's wife, Patricia, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her painted lips parting in embarrassment. Isaac Morrison, Ruth's husband, looked as though the blood had drained from his face. He opened his mouth to protest, but his sisters stared at their plates, refusing to meet Ruth's eyes. Even the youngest cousin, who had been giggling moments earlier, fell silent. Ruth rose slowly, smoothing her dress with graceful composure. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice cutting through the tension like glass. She reached for her purse at the side table. No one moved. The room felt strangled by the weight of Vincent's contempt. Isaac's voice broke through at last, heavy with desperation. "Ruth, wait." But she was already walking toward the door. The grand Victorian house loomed around her, its polished floors and high ceilings reminders of Vincent's pride. What he didn't know, what not one person at that table realized, was that Ruth had helped finance this very house. He had spent years bragging about his investments, never imagining the anonymous backer funding his real estate empire was sitting quietly at his table, enduring his arrogance. Stepping into the cool October night, Ruth pulled her phone from her bag. The bitterness in her chest transformed into a cold determination. Her fingers scrolled through contacts until she found the number she needed. "Hello, Patricia," she said when her lawyer answered, her voice calm despite the storm raging in her heart. "It's Ruth. I need you to draft withdrawal notices for the Morrison Development Project. All funding, all partnerships, everything. I want them ready to send tomorrow morning." On the other end, her lawyer hesitated. "Ruth, are you certain? That's a substantial investment to pull out." Ruth glanced back through the dining room window, where Vincent gestured wildly to his relatives, probably spinning a story about why she deserved to be humiliated. Her lips curved into a grim smile. "I've never been more certain." Sliding into her Tesla, Ruth exhaled deeply. The irony wasn't lost on her. That evening, Vincent had bragged endlessly about his newest venture, a $15 million mixed-use development that was set to break ground Monday. He didn't know that his so-called worthless trash daughter-in-law was the very investor funding his dream. Now, with one phone call, she could strip it all away. The satisfaction that coursed through her veins felt dangerous but intoxicating. "Time to show him," she whispered to herself, fastening her seatbelt. "Time to show him exactly what this trash is worth." The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, Oregon's sky heavy with rain clouds. Ruth was in her home office by 7, her laptop open, coffee steaming beside her. The quiet hum of her computer was the only sound as she reviewed financial documents. Her lawyer had worked fast. The withdrawal notices were ready, waiting only for her final approval. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Isaac lit up the screen. "I'm so sorry about last night. Dad was completely out of line. Can we talk tonight?" Ruth stared at the words for a long moment. Isaac was a good man, caught between loyalty to his family and his love for her. But there were some lines that once crossed could not be smoothed over. She typed back simply, "I'm fine. At work early. Talk tonight." Isaac thought she was just another finance employee, someone working quietly in the background at a corporate office. He had no idea that his wife wasn't a simple analyst but the CEO of Crystalia Holdings, an investment firm she had built from scratch. He didn't know that she had been secretly funding his father's company for the past 18 months. He didn't know that the very projects Vincent bragged about were standing on Ruth's money. Ruth closed her eyes briefly, recalling all the family dinners where Vincent had belittled her for not having real work. The irony was exquisite. "He'll know soon enough," she whispered into her coffee cup. Her fingers hovered over the mouse as she opened the Morrison file. The numbers were staggering. Vincent's company was leveraged so heavily on the new project that without Crystalia's money, he would crumble. All of his properties had been tied up as collateral, betting everything on the Crown Plaza development. Ruth imagined the look on his face when he realized his empire was about to collapse, not because of market forces or poor timing, but because the woman he had called worthless trash had withdrawn her hand. She smiled to herself, a smile both sharp and dangerous. At precisely 9:30 a.m., Ruth picked up the phone. "Send the notices," she said to her lawyer. "All of them. Every single one. I want Vincent Morrison to receive 3 messages at exactly 10 a.m. sharp. First, his lawyer gets the official withdrawal. Second, Isaac receives a text explaining the truth, that I'm the investor his father has been praising. Third, Vincent himself gets a text from me." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "It will say simply, 'Don't mess with trash.'" Her lawyer hesitated. "Ruth, this will destroy him. Are you absolutely sure?" Ruth turned her chair toward the window, watching raindrops trail down the glass. She thought of Vincent's face the night before, twisted with disdain, his voice booming in front of 23 witnesses. She thought of how not a single person defended her. She thought of how her husband sat frozen, unable to challenge his father. The humiliation still burned, but now it was wrapped in steel. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm sure. Send them." At 10 a.m. precisely, Ruth sat in her office, watching the digital clock tick. The moment felt both surreal and inevitable. Somewhere across Portland, Vincent would be sitting at his desk, convinced the world admired him, completely unaware that his empire was seconds away from imploding. Her phone remained silent. She folded her hands, her breath steady. Then, at 10:07, her phone buzzed. The first call was from Isaac. "Ruth." His voice was frantic. "I just got the craziest message. It says, 'You're the anonymous investor Dad's been working with.' That can't be true, right?" Ruth leaned back in her chair, her voice calm. "Why can't it be true, Isaac?" He stammered, struggling. "Because that investor put millions into Dad's projects. You work for some finance company. You don't have that kind of money." He paused. "Please tell me this is some kind of mistake." Ruth's heart softened slightly at the panic in his voice, but her reply was firm. "It's not a mistake. Isaac, I own Crystalia Holdings. I've been running my own investment firm for 5 years. Your father's projects have been part of my portfolio for the last 18 months. The line went silent for so long she thought the call had dropped. Finally, Isaac whispered, "You've been funding Dad's business this whole time." "Financially, yes," Ruth replied. "I saw potential in his projects. I invested. But your father never knew because I kept my involvement anonymous." Isaac exhaled shakily. "Last night, he spent the entire evening bragging about his investor. He kept saying this person had vision, that they understood quality development." His voice cracked. "He was talking about you. He didn't even know." Ruth rose from her chair and walked toward the window, watching the rain blur the city skyline. "That's the irony, Isaac. He praised me without realizing it. He built his pride on my investments, then called me worthless trash in front of everyone." Isaac's tone grew desperate. "Ruth, what did you do?" "That text. It mentioned withdrawals." Her phone buzzed again. Vincent's name appeared on the screen. "Isaac," she said calmly, "your father is calling me. I think he's figured it out." "Don't answer," Isaac pleaded. "Please, let's talk first." But Ruth was already declining the call, opening her laptop to check her emails. Sure enough, frantic messages were pouring in. first from Vincent's lawyer, then from Vincent himself, each one more desperate than the last. Ruth's lips curved into a grim smile. Isaac, your father is about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. The Crown Plaza project is dead. Without my funding, he can't cover his loans. His entire empire will collapse within 60 days. Isaac's breathing quickened on the other end of the call. Ruth, he's my father. Please don't do this. He'll lose everything. Ruth's voice was calm but firm. Isaac, last night your father told the entire family I was worthless trash. Do you want me to keep funding a man who humiliates me in public while living on my money? Isaac fell silent, torn between love for his wife and fear for his father. Ruth could almost hear his heart breaking through the line. You don't understand, he whispered. No, Isaac, Ruth corrected. Your father doesn't understand. Not long after, her office door burst open. Vincent stormed inside, his face red, his silver hair disheveled. Isaac trailed behind him, looking ashamed. This is impossible, Vincent roared. You can't be Crystalia Holdings. That's a major investment firm. Ruth gestured toward the chair. Please sit, Vincent. Or should I say Mr. Morrison, since this is business now. Vincent remained standing, gripping the chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. You're a housewife, he spat. You don't have millions of dollars. Ruth opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Meet Ruth Peterson, CEO and founder of Crystalia Holdings. I've managed over 50 million in assets since graduating from Wharton. Vincent's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. This can't be real. It's very real, Ruth replied coolly. Would you like me to show you the records? Every dollar, every contract, every permit that kept your business alive came from me. Isaac shifted uncomfortably by the door. Dad, he said quietly, it's true. Every success you've had this past year was because of Ruth's money. Vincent collapsed into the chair, his arrogance cracking. But you never said anything. You just sat there while Ruth leaned forward. While you lectured me about real work. While you called me trash. I sat there funding your life. Vincent's voice grew desperate. You can't do this. I have contracts, commitments. The groundbreaking is Monday. Ruth stood and walked around the desk to face him directly. Vincent, last night you declared I was worthless. You humiliated me in front of your entire family. And yet, I was the only thing keeping your empire afloat. His phone buzzed furiously on the desk. Ruth pointed to it. That's probably your contractors. They've already received cancellation notices. Vincent's trembling hand reached for the phone. No, this can't be happening. For the next 3 hours, chaos reigned. Vincent paced his office like a trapped animal, answering call after call. How much? No, that's impossible. We had a payment schedule. He barked into the phone. Another call came in. Patricia, it's Vincent. I need to know my legal options for forcing an investor to stay on board. Ruth calmly looked up from her laptop. Vincent, don't waste your money. Every contract I signed included a withdrawal clause. What I did this morning is completely legal. Vincent spun toward her, eyes blazing. You planned this. Ruth shook her head. No. I made the decision last night at 10:07, the moment you called me worthless trash. Isaac finally stepped forward. Dad, do you realize what you've done? Ruth wasn't just an investor, she was family. She was supporting you while you treated her like nothing. Vincent's phone rang again. This time when he answered, his face turned white. What do you mean foreclosure proceedings? 60 days. That's not possible. He hung up slowly, his voice breaking. Ruth tilted her head. Your primary lender. Vincent nodded numbly. We used the Crown Plaza project as collateral. Without it, the bank is calling in everything. Ruth's eyes hardened. Then your empire falls, Vincent. Vincent sank back into his chair. His arrogance shattered. Please, Ruth. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. Ruth crossed her arms. You'll apologize because you've lost money, not because you respect me. That's not the same thing. Isaac looked between them, his face pale. Ruth picked her bag. Vincent, you praised your mysterious investor for vision and brilliance. You never imagined it was the same woman you dismissed as worthless. Now you'll learn what happens when trash walks away. Vincent's phone buzzed again, but Ruth was already heading for the door. 2 weeks later, Ruth sat at her favorite coffee shop downtown, reading the front page of the Portland Business Journal. The headline made her smirk. Local developer files for bankruptcy after mystery investor withdraws support. The article described in detail how Vincent's company had gone from rising star to financial ruin in just 14 days. Isaac slid into the seat across from her, looking tired. It's official, he said. Dad lost everything. The office, the rentals, even the house. Ruth stirred her latte. And how is he handling it? Isaac sighed. Badly. He still thinks this is a misunderstanding. He asked me yesterday to convince you to meet him. He thinks he can explain why the family needs you. Ruth nearly choked on her coffee. The family needs me. After being called trash in front of 23 people. Isaac rubbed his temples. He doesn't see you as the investor. In his mind, you're just my wife, who happens to own the company investing in him. He can't accept that you personally made those decisions. Ruth glanced out the window at the empty construction lot where the Crown Plaza should have been breaking ground. A sign read project postponed. She smiled faintly. His failure has become my opportunity. 3 developers have already contacted me about partnerships. Vincent's collapse spread quickly through Portland's business circles. At networking events, his name was whispered as a cautionary tale. The man who insulted his anonymous investor and lost everything. Potential partners quietly withdrew interest, not wanting to work with someone who couldn't recognize the person funding his empire. The humiliation was worse than the bankruptcy. Vincent had called his own daughter-in-law worthless trash while she was secretly the backbone of his business. No one respected him anymore. Every meeting began with awkward questions about the Crystalia incident. 6 months later, Ruth attended Isaac's cousin's wedding. Vincent was nowhere in sight. His wife, Patricia, approached Ruth during the reception, her eyes watery. Ruth, I want to apologize. Vincent was cruel that night. We all know it now. We also know you were generous to support his business for so long. Ruth studied her for a moment, then gave a polite smile. I accept your apology, Patricia. But some damage cannot be undone. Patricia nodded, her shoulders slumping. The family ties had been scorched beyond repair. Meanwhile, Ruth thrived. Her firm grew stronger than ever. Developers who had once hesitated now sought her out, impressed by her strategic withdrawal from a toxic partnership. At her new downtown office, she signed contracts with companies eager to work with someone who combined financial brilliance with unshakable principles. She didn't even need to spread the story. Vincent himself had made her reputation shine brighter by underestimating her so publicly. Respect came easily now, not because she demanded it, but because people understood she had earned it. Vincent, on the other hand, spiraled downward. His bankruptcy stripped him of properties, influence, and pride. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man who had mocked his investor and lost everything. Even his marriage crumbled. Patricia could no longer endure the humiliation or the financial wreckage. Their children, once loyal, pulled back after realizing their father had depended on Ruth's money while belittling her at every opportunity. Vincent's empire had fallen, but worse than that. His mask had slipped, showing everyone the contempt that lived inside him. Attempts to rebuild were pitiful. Vincent tried to start new ventures, but investors laughed him out of the room. How could you not recognize your own daughter-in-law as your backer? They whispered. If you couldn't respect the person funding you, how can we trust you? Eventually, the once proud mogul took a junior role at another developer's firm, far beneath the man who had once boasted about his brilliance. Portland no longer saw him as a visionary, but as a warning. A man destroyed by arrogance. One crisp spring morning, Ruth stood on the balcony of her new office tower overlooking the city. Below, workers buzzed around a construction site that Crystalia Holdings had funded. This time, the developers respected her, valued her input, and treated her like the partner she was. Isaac joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "You changed everything," he said softly. Ruth looked at him, her expression steady. "No, Isaac. Vincent changed everything when he called me trash. I just stopped pretending my value was invisible." Isaac kissed her forehead gently. "I'm proud of you, Ruth. I just wish my father had seen what you were really worth." Ruth sighed, her eyes scanning the skyline. He did, Isaac. He just couldn't accept it. Pride blinded him. Isaac squeezed her hand. "Do you think he'll ever recover?" Ruth's voice was soft but certain. "No, not really. Money can be rebuilt, but respect, once lost, it doesn't come back." Isaac nodded quietly, his face heavy with sadness. He knew she was right. Later that evening, Ruth sat alone in her home office, reviewing contracts for her next project. The lamp cast a warm glow across the papers, highlighting words like equity, partnership, growth. She paused, staring at her reflection in the window. She remembered sitting at that dining table months ago, humiliated, called trash in front of everyone. She remembered the fire that had ignited inside her. And she remembered the satisfaction of watching Vincent's empire fall under the weight of his own arrogance. "Sometimes," she murmured, "walking away is the strongest strike of all." News of Vincent's downfall lingered in Portland for years. His name became shorthand for arrogance and blindness. "Don't pull a Morrison," people would joke at business mixers. Meanwhile, Ruth's reputation soared. Investors trusted her instincts, and developers admired her fairness. She became a quiet legend in her industry, not because she sought revenge, but because she demanded respect. And respect, once earned, had more power than any fortune. Isaac often told her she was stronger than anyone he knew. Ruth only smiled. Strength, she thought, was born from fire. Vincent lived out his days bitter and diminished, unable to shake the story of how he lost everything by insulting the very person who had saved him. His arrogance had been his crown, and now it was his prison. Meanwhile, Ruth thrived not only in business but in life. She surrounded herself with people who valued her, building a circle of genuine respect and partnership. She never raised her voice to boast, never flaunted her wealth. She didn't need to. Her quiet confidence spoke louder than Vincent's old shouts ever had. And so, in the end, Ruth's revenge wasn't in destroying Vincent. It was in refusing to carry him any longer. His empire collapsed under its own weight the moment she stepped away. He had called her worthless trash in front of the world, and the world had shown him what a lie that was. Ruth Peterson walked forward into her future, not as the wife mocked at a family dinner, but as the woman who proved that trash can be worth more than an empire. Sometimes the most powerful answer to cruelty is not vengeance, but clarity.